December 16, 1944. At 0630 hours in Mona, Germany, the pencil raced urgently over the freezing page as Hetman Klaus Richter from the 12th SS Panzer Division documented what would stand as one of the most horrifying reports in Wehrmacht battle records. The Americans now have a weapon that overturns all established tactical strategies. Our troops are being killed in their trenches by artillery rounds that detonate in mid-air above them. There is no protection, no shelter. The threat descends from above, peering through the dawn fog. RTOR had observed the destruction of a full battalion trying to traverse open terrain near Hen. This did not occur due to direct strikes, which are uncommon in artillery battles. Nor was it the result of traditional time delay shells that need careful computation, but of something unthinkable. These projectiles appeared to know precisely when to burst, exploding 30 feet overhead, releasing deadly shrapnel downward in a way no dugout could withstand. In a span of 3 minutes, 702 German troops lost their lives. The handful who made it back were so traumatized they only managed to mutter a single sentence. Die Luft tot. The air kills. What Hetman Richter was unaware of was that he had just observed the introduction of America's most top-secret ground combat weapon. This invention, revolutionary in scope, would amplify artillery efficiency by 1,000%, save tens of thousands of Allied soldiers, and forever change the face of combat. The proximity fuse, a tiny radar mechanism installed within artillery ammunition, was the planet's initial smart armament, a guided shell that would be more critical in ending the war than all but the atomic bomb. The facts of its effectiveness would become clear. While standard shells took 500 shots to bring down one enemy airplane, those fitted with proximity fuses did so with only 155 rounds. Where classic bombardments killed entrenched troops just 5% of the time, proximity-fused artillery achieved a 70% fatality rate. When London's odds against the V-1 flying bombs seemed hopeless, proximity fuses succeeded in destroying 79% of incoming rockets in only 4 weeks. Yet the origins of this groundbreaking device can be found not in American research centers, but during the most desperate period of Britain's bleakest days, when survival looked unattainable. On October 30, 1939, in Exeter, England, as Britain's first wartime winter was descending, a young researcher named W. put forward a plan that would transform military conflict for good. Employed at the Air Defense Lab alongside colleagues Edward Shish and Amherst Thompson, but devised an idea that initially appeared straight out of science fiction: an artillery shell that could make its own decisions. The idea was motivated by harsh mathematical facts. In the First World War, anti-aircraft gunners had to shoot approximately 8,500 shells to destroy a single enemy plane. By the year 1939, as aircraft achieved greater speeds and altitudes, the ratio deteriorated further. Britain's ability to endure the imminent aerial conflict would hinge on substantially enhancing these odds. The answer lay in using radio waves to both detect incoming planes and detonate shells at precisely the right distance automatically. However, this approach faced an obstacle that seemed impossible to overcome given the technology of 1939. The radio fuse would have to survive firing from a gun with forces surpassing 20,000 times the force of gravity, spin at a rate of 30,000 revolutions per minute, function in temperatures ranging from -50 to +100 degrees Fahrenheit, and still be sensitive enough to identify aircraft at a distance of 70 feet. By June 1940, British scientists had built initial models, putting them to the test in unrotated projectiles, basically rockets targeting balloons. The trials confirmed the principle could work, but also highlighted the immense technological barrier. There were no existing electronic parts that could withstand the extreme violence of gunfire. Relief would arrive from across the ocean, delivered at Britain's bleakest moment by one of the most significant scientific missions in history. On September 6, 1940, in Halifax, Nova Scotia, the Canadian Pacific liner Duchess of Richmond docked, bringing cargo more precious than gold. Sir Henry Tizard was aboard, along with a black metal deed box holding all of Britain's most important military secrets. The Tizard mission, as it would be called, constituted a risk never before taken. A nation locked in a fight for survival, offering its most zealously protected military innovations to a country not yet engaged in the war. The mission gathered in Washington on September 12, taking up quarters at the Wardman Park Hotel. For 7 days, they shared Britain's technological advancements. These included radar apparatus, jet propulsion blueprints, new explosive compounds, and studies into chemical warfare. However, on September 19, in a meeting room with a view of Connecticut Avenue, the British physicist Dr. John Cockcroft presented something unique to a young American scientist specifically summoned for the occasion. Dr. Merle A. Tuve, aged 39, listened intently as Cockcroft explained the British efforts on the proximity fuse. Tuve, who grew up on a farm in South Dakota, had spent his youth building radios with his friend Ernest Lawrence, later a Nobel laureate. Only 1 month before, in August 1940, Vannevar Bush had chosen Tuve to head a covert new division within the National Defense Research Committee, called Section T, devoted entirely to developing proximity fuses. Tuve's selection was not by chance. During that previous summer, he and his wife, Winnie, had been listening to radio broadcasts about the London Blitz. The reporter described rescuing children from collapsed buildings, whole districts wiped out within minutes, and the dire insufficiency of British anti-aircraft defenses. With tears in his eyes, Tuve turned to his wife and said, "We must find a way to stop those bombers. Science has to determine the solution." At that very moment in the Washington Conference, Cockcroft was providing him with the precise chance to do so. Yet, the British plan, while ingenious, was still only an idea. The crucial difficulty remained unsolved: how to create vacuum tubes and electronic circuits robust enough to endure being fired from a gun. Cockcroft candidly admitted where the British fell short. They did not possess the manufacturing power or necessary resources to undertake the vast development that was essential. The United States, with its enormous industrial capabilities and secure location, stood as the only feasible option. Tuve departed from the meeting with a purpose that would preoccupy him for the next 5 years and rally the entire American electronics sector. The task seemed unimaginable. Success would demand inventions not yet devised, entirely new production methods, and a scale of output never before attempted. December 1940, Department of Terrestrial Magnetism, Carnegie Institution, Washington, D.C. The residence at 5241 Broad Branch Road had been converted into the headquarters of the nation's most clandestine armaments initiative. Tuve had gathered a team destined to transform the nature of conflict. Richard B. Roberts, a physicist specializing in nuclear science who had collaborated with Niels Bohr, Henry H. Porter, a specialist in sound technology. Robert B. Broad, whose expertise was in studying cosmic radiation. Lawrence Haftad, another expert in nuclear physics. Lloyd Berkner, recognized for his groundbreaking research on the ionosphere, along with 26-year-old physicist James Van Allen, whose subsequent discovery of the Earth's radiation belts would bring him renown, though his wartime work would remain a secret for many years. They were confronted with a problem that contradicted all known electronic principles. Building a proximity fuse meant fitting an entire radar apparatus encompassing transmitter, receiver, amplifier, and detonator into an area even smaller than a standard coffee can. This system would have to produce radio signals, register their echoes from targets, interpret the returns, and set off the explosive, all while enduring forces intense enough to destroy any standard electronic apparatus. Van Allen undertook the most basic issue: designing vacuum tubes capable of surviving a gun's launch. Existing vacuum tubes, with their fragile glass bodies and easily broken filaments, broke apart under just 100 Gs of force. Yet, the proximity fuse needed to endure forces 200 times that amount. Van Allen spent half a year working with Rithon, a Massachusetts-based hearing aid manufacturer, to develop miniature tubes using groundbreaking construction methods. Instead of suspending filaments by delicate wiring, they implemented stiff structures, inspired by hearing aid assembly techniques. The decisive moment arrived in January 1942, when Van Allen introduced his mousetrap spring mechanism, a mechanical device shielding the tube filaments during firing's violent acceleration, then releasing them for regular function during flight. The patent covering this mechanism would stay secret until 1947, but it stood as one of the war's most pivotal advances in electronics. Lloyd Berkner generated another significant breakthrough in December 1940 by devising a circuit that separated transmitter from receiver roles, a notable advancement over the British Autodyne model. His design enabled the fuse to sense targets from farther away with improved dependability, which was necessary for real combat effectiveness. By March 1942, the scope of the project had exceeded Carnegie's capacity. Johns Hopkins University responded by founding the Applied Physics Laboratory at an old Chevrolet showroom at 8621 Georgia Avenue in Silver Spring, Maryland. When the pioneering scientists walked in, the place still carried the odor of oil and rubber, but soon it accommodated the planet's foremost electronics research facility. Merle Tuve was named APPL's founding director, establishing a laboratory ethic that shaped America's armaments innovation for generations. Placards were posted throughout. "I don't want any damn fool in this laboratory to save money. I only want him to save time." Another proclaimed, "Our moral responsibility goes all the way to the final battle use of this unit. Its failure there is our failure." Even by contemporary metrics, the performance specifications of their accomplishment appear outlandish. The proximity fuse worked as a continuous wave radar unit broadcasting on 180 to 220 MHz, frequencies that were the forefront of radio science in 1940. The projectile's metallic casing functioned as the transmitting antenna, energized by a small conical nose antenna. The full apparatus was configured as an Autodyne circuit, so a single oscillator tube performed as both sender and receiver. This was a streamlined design forced by the severe limits of available space. Within a cavity scarcely 5 inches long and 2 inches wide, they installed 4 miniaturized vacuum tubes, a total of 130 electronic pieces, a wet cell power source, safety devices, and the detonating machine. The oscillator tube produced a 70 MHz signal along with harmonics that hit the 180 to 220 MHz range. When these signals rebounded from their targets, patterns of interference emerged, which altered the oscillator's load and created difference frequencies in the 200 to 800 Hz span. Such frequencies were boosted by a 2-stage amplifier, filtered to select those showing a target's approach, then used to fire a thiron gas-filled tube that triggered detonation. The energy supply was yet another apparently improbable invention. Regular batteries could not withstand high acceleration or give enough energy in such a compact form. The remedy emerged from the National Carbon Company, which made a radical new reserve battery using liquid electrolyte in a glass capsule. The firing force smashed the ampule, and the shell's spinning motion drove the liquid into layered carbon and zinc electrodes, thus powering the device in flight. This resulted in unlimited storage life until activation, then providing total power precisely when needed. Various fail-safe mechanisms stopped the explosive from detonating prematurely. Devices operated by centrifugal force remained off until optimal spin speed was reached. An arming interval of 0.5 to 0.7 seconds followed firing, preventing the explosive from activating close to friendly positions. Sensitivity increased steadily as the shell traveled, becoming most effective at standard engagement distances. January 5, 1943, 0800 hours, Southwest Pacific near Guadalcanal. The USS Helena's radar acquired inbound planes, specifically 4 Each 3A Val dive bombers at 12,000 feet. Lieutenant Russell Red Cochran, commanding the ship's rear 5-inch battery, had only recently been informed about the new shells. In the storage bay below, loaders readied rounds marked with distinctive green strips, denoting the Navy's proximity-fused ammunition. Range, 8,000 yards and closing, was reported by the rangefinder. Cochran followed the incoming aircraft through his field glasses. Normally, Direct hits would be required, an almost unattainable feat against evasive aircraft. These rounds, however, needed merely to pass within 70 feet of their mark. Open fire. The initial volley thundered from Helena's main guns. Red streaks carved through the dawn, approaching the lead valve. Nothing occurred at first. The targets were still out of effective reach. 15 seconds later, the second volley was sent. At a distance of 5,000 yards from Helena, 11,000 feet high, a round passed about 60 feet from the lead attacker. The blast was unlike anything Cochrane had witnessed previously. The shell did not simply overshoot or burst upon impact but exploded mid-air, creating a perfect globe of flying shards. Instantly, the valve's wing was torn free. Its engine, riddled by hundreds of pieces of steel, erupted in flames. The craft did not violently disintegrate but instead fell from flight, morphing suddenly from a diving warplane to a turning, blazing heap of aluminum. Splash 1, the observer called out. The surviving dive bombers pulled away, but Helena's main battery maintained pursuit. 3 more volleys, another 12 proximity-fused rounds. A second attacker erupted as a round ignited 40 feet beneath its belly. Upward flying fragments slashed through its fuel tanks and killed the pilot instantly. Meanwhile, the combat report was already being coded over the radio. Enemy planes encountered using special shells. 2 definitely downed. Shell effectiveness greater than anticipated. What would go unmentioned were the effects on Helena's men. First-class gunners mate Anthony Pui would later say, "We just couldn't believe it. We'd been shooting at planes for months, using thousands of shells, and maybe hit one if we were fortunate. Now we were dropping them with a handful of shots. It was like some higher power was steering our ammunition." Samuel Eliot Morrison, the Navy's official chronicler stationed in the Pacific, would write, "The burning plane hulls and brilliant fires on the water's surface confirmed the sharp shooting of the anti-air units and the effectiveness of the top-secret Mark 32 shell fuse." The repercussions traveled through the entire Pacific Fleet with incredible swiftness. On August 12, 1942, prior even to Helena's combat engagement, the USS Cleveland had held the test that persuaded the Navy to commit fully to the new ammunition. In Chesapeake Bay, the ship was pitted against 3 radio-controlled aerial drones, demanding targets capable of evasive flight. The event was planned for 2 days but concluded in under 2 hours. The first drone was downed by the second burst from proximity-fused rounds. The second was destroyed on the 4th salvo. The third target was demolished on the initial burst. Navy spectators were so astonished that they immediately halted further trials and rushed to initiate mass manufacture. Admiral William Spike Blandy, observing the trial from the Cleveland's bridge, commented to his assistant, "This changes everything. Every vessel in the Pacific must have these immediately." As of spring 1943, proximity fuses were being shipped to the Pacific theater in remarkable numbers. The first 5,000 units reached USS Enterprise, USS Saratoga, and USS Helena, all overseen directly by Commander W.S. Parsons, the same individual who would later prepare the atomic bomb on the Enola Gay. Security protocol was absolute. The ammunition was held in locked storage guarded day and night. Only gunnery officers were told the details of their operation. Enlisted crew were instead told the rounds were special incendiaries, to keep their unique appearance hidden. 1943's statistics made the transformation clear. Proximity fuses formed just 25% of all anti-aircraft shells used, but cost 51% of Japanese planes shot down by fleet guns. The average rounds spent for each kill fell from 58 using timed shells to only 15.5 with proximity fuses, a threefold gain that grew as more sailors became adept. Second-class gunners mate Robert Chen, serving on the USS Essex, recorded the change in his journal. March 1943, 300 rounds expended against attacking Betty bombers, no results. September 1943, the new shells with green stripes arrived. Firings: 80 rounds at enemy valves, 3 splashdowns. The crew believes our aim has improved. They don't realize it's the shells themselves doing the calculating now. June 19, 1944, 1,000 hours, Philippine Sea, 200 miles west of Guam. Lieutenant James Van Allen stood atop the flag bridge on the USS Washington, watching radar plots crowd with incoming targets. This is the same James Van Allen who invented the shock-resistant vacuum tubes and now observed the ultimate challenge for his invention. The Japanese had unleashed their entire carrier air arm 423 planes in a last-ditch mission to destroy American forces supporting the Marianas landing. Van Allen, having received his commission in November 1942, had spent 16 months instructing gunnery officers all across the Pacific Fleet. He was aware that every ship was supplied with proximity-fused ammunition. He knew exactly what the theoretical success rate should be, but experience in warfare was something else entirely. The Combat Information Center reported, Raid 1 on bearing 265 Angels 2069 aircraft. Admiral Mark Mitcher gave the command, launch all fighters, gun crews to battle stations. As Hellcat fighters attacked the advancing Japanese units, those that managed to slip through encountered an unprecedented barrage of proximity-fused anti-aircraft fire in naval warfare. From the bridge of the Washington, Van Allen observed as dark bursts filled the air, each an indication of a proximity-fused explosion. Japanese planes started dropping rapidly. A Zero fighter made a steep dive toward the USS South Dakota, which was 1,000 yards from Washington. Van Allen saw the 5-inch guns on South Dakota swivel accurately, releasing controlled bursts. On the third shot, the shell exploded 50 feet away from the Zero. The aircraft did not detonate but disintegrated, wings separating from the body, the engine coming loose, the pilot tumbling out. Van Allen would later describe in a letter to his wife that it was a calculated massacre. He claimed the proximity fuses transformed the vessels into citadels. He recognized the bravery of the Japanese pilots, noting they charged ahead as whole units were eradicated. Yet their valor could not surpass technological superiority. By the close of the day, Japanese forces had lost 315 carrier-based planes and an additional 50 land-based aircraft. U.S. losses amounted to 29 planes, predominantly due to accidents, not combat. The decisively unequal battle spelled the effective conclusion of Japanese carrier aviation. They were never again able to mount a standard carrier airstrike. Their next principal tactic would be shaped by necessity. On USS Bunker Hill, aviation radioman Charles Calhoun recorded, "We could see them falling everywhere, burning, breaking up, whole but lifeless." The gunners were both laughing and shedding tears. After 2 years enduring Japanese air raids, we were finally retaliating. Proximity fuses rendered our guns almost omnipotent. October 25, 1944. 0740 hours, Leyte Gulf, Philippines. Lieutenant Commander Robert Roberts looked on in panic from USS White Plains as a Zero, ablaze after taking anti-aircraft fire, woefully crashed into the flight deck of USS St. Lo. The resulting blast ignited torpedo warheads on the hangar deck. Mere moments later, St. Lo capsized and went under. It marked the first significant warship destroyed by a kamikaze attack. The Japanese had found the one way to circumvent the proximity fuse, eliminate the need for the plane to survive its run. If an aircraft was destroyed 50 feet from its mark by a proximity fuse, its mission was a failure. However, a kamikaze struck down 50 feet away could still reach the ship by sheer momentum. Thus began the era of the divine wind. Analysis of combat statistics highlighted this shift in tactics. Standard Japanese assaults now yielded only a 2% hit rate, with 23 successes out of 1,092 attacks from October 1944 through January 1945. Kamikaze runs, by contrast, achieved 34% success, with 121 hits in 352 tries. Proximity fuses rendered conventional attacks all but hopeless, causing the Japanese to adopt suicide tactics instead. Still, proximity fuses remained highly effective even against kamikaze strikes. In the Philippines campaign, Anti-aircraft fire was credited with downing or deflecting 231 out of 364 kamikaze attempts, a 64% success rate. Proximity fuses were responsible for 44% of all kills made by 5-inch guns. Without this innovation, American fatalities would likely have doubled or tripled. Gunner's mate William Formby on USS Nashville recounted, "The Japs charged us like their lives meant nothing, because they didn't care anymore. Our proximity fuses would blast them apart, but the debris still came at us. We'd shred a whole plane, but fragments at 300 miles per hour still struck hard. The fuses saved us from most, but for the few that penetrated, only divine intervention could help those ships." May 11, 1945, 1500 hours. Radar picket duty 1,560 miles north of Okinawa. Commander Baron J. Melanie on USS Hadley watched the radar display with mounting alarm. The 6th Kakusu was incoming. Over 150 Japanese planes were coordinating a kamikaze assault. Hadley and USS Evans were the sole ships at the picket site, serving as the fleet's lookout and initial line of defense. Multiple enemy formations, all headings, more than 150 targets, reported the combat center. Melanie had prepared his team with relentless drills. Everyone understood his function. The 5-inch magazines were filled only with proximity-fused rounds. The gun squadrons had drilled until they could consistently fire 15 shells per minute per weapon, the maximum sustainable rate. At 15:20, a dozen aircraft from the north initiated the first assault. Hadley's guns responded at 12,000 yards. Proximity fuses immediately began their lethal job. The first enemy went down at 8,000 yards, the next at 6,000, and a third at 4,000. The fourth kamikaze, already aflame, crashed only 50 yards from the starboard side, pelting the ship with fragments but inflicting no major harm. But this was merely the start. For 95 consecutive minutes, Hadley struggled to survive wave after wave of attackers. The barrels on the guns became glowing hot. Spent ammunition handlers were swapped out as they collapsed. Proximity fuses continually did their work. Gunner's mate 2nd Class Robert Eiley, stationed at Gun Mount 52, later reported, "They attacked from every direction, high and low. The proximity fuses performed flawlessly. We'd fire, and 3 seconds after, there was an explosion and scorched debris falling. We'd repeat, and see more blasts. It was a pattern boom, boom, boom. Then wait 3 seconds, another explosion. At 16:15, Hadley's fortune changed. 3 kamikazes, all badly damaged by the fuses but still operational, smashed into the ship in rapid order. Another aircraft's bomb detonated in the aft engine compartment. Hadley was heavily damaged, 30 dead, 68 injured, with engineering spaces submerged and flames spreading. Nonetheless, the vessel withstood the attacks and gunners continued their defense. Even as damage control fought blazes and flooding, forward artillery pieces persisted in targeting incoming aircraft. When the fight ended at 16:55, Hadley had taken down 23 planes, establishing a destroyer's single battle record. In his after-action narrative, Commander Melanie stated, "The proximity fuse was crucial to our survival. Lacking it, we'd have been overrun within the first 20 minutes. Despite being battered and burning, the fuses permitted us to resist even when other ammunition would have been ineffective in such overwhelming odds." The Okinawa campaign statistics painted a grim picture. There were 1,900 Japanese kamikaze sorties. 368 American vessels were damaged, 34 lost, 4,975 sailors perished, and 4,824 wounded. Yet post-war evaluations claim that without proximity fuses, the losses would have exceeded 15,000 dead and over 100 ships sunk. The proximity fuse marked the difference between a costly triumph and possible disaster. June 13, 1944, 04:00 hours, London. The distinctive throbbing of a pulse jet engine reverberated through the capital. A harsh droning noise that would soon haunt millions. The opening V-1 flying bomb of the main campaign struck Grove Road, Bethnal Green, taking 6 civilian lives, including Mrs. Carrie Harrison, who became the first Londoner killed by Hitler's vengeance weapon. Unlike the Blitz of 1940-41, London now had a defense capability that would have been inconceivable earlier. On June 12, the day before the V-1 offensive began, just 6 days following D-Day, Winston Churchill made a call that would spare thousands. Despite warnings from security officials worried the technology might be captured by the Germans, Churchill approved using proximity fuses for London's defense. General Sir Frederick Pyle, head of Anti-Aircraft Command, had positioned 500 large-caliber anti-aircraft guns, both British 3.7-inch and American 90mm, in a protective arc south of London. Each gun was coordinated through 584 Seychelles rupees radar and M9 electronic directors, forming a semi-automated defense grid. Without proximity fuses, even this advanced network achieved just a 24% success rate within the first week. Squadron leader Prudence Hill, stationed at RAF Stanmore's filter room, monitored the change. "The first week was horrifying," Hill recalled. "They plotted waves of V-1s moving toward London, most of them getting through. The guns blazed constantly but achieved virtually nothing. By the next week, everything changed. The artillery suddenly started hitting most targets. On her board, V-1 after V-1 was vanishing 10 miles outside London. What she observed was the arrival of freshly manufactured American proximity fuses. By week 2, artillery downed 46% of targeted V-1s. The third week, it increased to 67%. By the fourth, it reached 79%. The improvement was so sudden that German spies informed Hitler the British must be deploying a mysterious anti-missile device. Gunner Sergeant Kenneth Brown with the U.S. 184th AAA Battalion near Biggin Hill described the improvement. "With conventional shells, we had to guess exactly where the flying bomb would be and when. A second's error, a degree off, and it missed. With proximity shells, we just aimed close, the fuse did the job. It was like throwing darts blindfolded compared to throwing them while looking." On August 28, 1944, the defense system had its greatest triumph. Early warning radar spotted 104 volts ones en route to London. Guns with proximity shells shot down 96. RAF fighters brought down 4 more. Only 4 made it to the city. The V-1 menace was effectively ended for London. The final numbers were clear. Out of 9,300 volts ones directed at London over 80 days, roughly 2,340 were eliminated by anti-aircraft fire using proximity fuses. Absent this weapon, additional losses were projected at over 20,000 dead and 50,000 wounded. Churchill would eventually remark, "More than all other individual advances, the proximity fuse saved London from destruction by flying bombs."